Welcome back to CBS Sports HQ. Another seismic shift for the college football landscape on Thursday. Both USC and UCLA being accepted as new members of the Big Ten. The programs have announced their respective departures from the Pac-12 beginning in 2024. The conference is now left reeling, having lost two of its signature programs amid ongoing negotiations for a new media rights deal. Given the current contracts expire on June the 30th of 2024, Thursday was the last day for USC and UCLA to inform the Pac-12 of their plans to depart without incurring any financial penalties. So as we take a look at how the Big Ten now looks, USC and UCLA set to join them in the 2024 season. See it divided into East and West. Lots of travel coming up for those West Coast teams, and of course, those November days playing in the Big Ten, not exactly a cakewalk. All right, for more on this, let's now welcome in CBS Sports college football writer Dennis Dodd, who's been run ragged over the last little while. There is no off season anymore, Dennis. There's always tons of news. Let's start with the obvious one here. Obviously, the departures leave the Pac-12 on life support. So what is next for them?
Well, realignment's just getting started, frankly, and that is the biggest question. What is left of the Pac-12? Is there a there? It's kind of a donut now. There's a hole. There's no center. Their biggest market is gone, LA. Their two teams in that market are gone. So it really comes down, Jeremy, right now. The next day story is who's going to move first, the Big 12 or the Pac-12? The Pac-12 has a new rights deal in 2024. They're close to negotiations now. The Big 12 in 2025. And it would behoove both conferences to move quickly to shore up their membership. Now, the problem with that is shoring up that membership may be poaching teams from each other. I think the Big 12 has a little bit of leverage here. They could go by shoring up and getting maybe the Arizona schools, which would give them pro rata. That is at least as much money they were going to get per school from the new TV rights deal. Maybe go big and get Utah and Colorado, or completely break up the Pac-12 and go Oregon, Washington, and go up to 20 teams, get 8 teams from the Pac-12. As far as the Pac-12 goes, I'm told, for those speculating that Oregon and Washington may be next for the Big Ten, I was on the phone this morning and I was told by a source that neither of those schools really bring, again, what USC and UCLA can bring in terms of the Big Ten, in terms of earning power, $80 to $100 million per year. In fact, I was shocked. This person said that Oregon and Washington were quote unquote tweeners in the realignment process, which means to me they could end up in a major conference or they could end up in the Mountain West.
So, Dennis, are we looking at the possibility of a merger, or are we looking at one of these conferences is basically that's gonna be it?
Yeah, I think all that's on the table. That's all TBA. I think one of these conferences could go away. I think cooler heads could prevail. You've got a brand new commissioner in the Big 12 and Brett Yormark, who's very aggressive, I'm told, but has never done anything like this, which George Kliavkoff at the Pac-12, very thoughtful, 1 year on the job. What's to keep them from getting in a room and combining their two best, their best teams, not two best, but their best teams at the top, and maybe forming a 20-team conference? If we're now in the age of super conferences with the SEC and Big Ten at the top, each with 16, at least there'd be strength in numbers. And you might have markets like, look, you'd have Phoenix, you'd have Oregon as a brand, not a market. You'd have Seattle, and then just take the best from the Big 12. So we're going to see that, I think, in the next period of months. We're going to see another seismic shift where a lot of schools that are in major conferences now may be left out.
I mean, it's going to be interesting. I mean, instead of being picked off, why not just form a super conference, the super conference of all conferences in terms of the numbers, if you can get the 20 teams together? Dennis, we saw some of the BYU independent team. Notre Dame has enjoyed independent status and reaped the financial benefits of that status for a long time. But given how things are changing, what would it take for Notre Dame to join a conference?
Yeah, this is a big conundrum. This is one of the biggest questions to come out of this, because legally it looks like if Notre Dame wants to join a conference, it has to be the ACC until the year 2036. That's how long that current deal goes. Now, their best fit would be in the Big Ten. That's what they fit the best geographically, academically, what have you. But does Notre Dame want to do anything at all? They value that independence and being able to schedule all over the country. But guess what? If you're in the Big Ten, that looks like you're scheduling all over the country. And if you're going to be in line for a playoff spot, whatever that looks like in the future with expansion, that has to be a consideration. So I think this is another line in the sand. The Big Ten for years at various times has tried to force, or ask or tried to force Notre Dame into the conference. Is this the time when they get them? They're at a nice tidy 16 at 80 to 100 million per school beginning in 2024, but that number might go up if Notre Dame's in there.
Yeah, certainly it would be coveted to have the Irish join your conference, right? The ACC announced a new scheduling model this week, essentially doing away with the division format with the top two teams based on winning percentage meeting to decide things. How could that change impact Miami and Clemson and other teams in the ACC?
Well, look, Jeremy, all the conferences are going to do it because it makes sense. The NCAA's changed their rules where you can do it. And with access to the playoff, both now and in the future, with expansion being everything, it makes sense to play in one table, one division, as it were, and match your two best teams at the top. Because, look, if you've got divisions, I always use the 2000, I think it was 19 example, when Northwestern got to the Big Ten championship game at 8-4. If they had upset Ohio State in that year, that would have kept Ohio State out of the playoff or out of a major bowl at least. You don't want that. You want your two best teams playing for schedule strength possibilities at most, and at the least getting two teams into a playoff. So I think that's why they're doing it. Every conference is going to do it. You're going to have 16 teams in the Big Ten, 16 teams in the SEC. And then the ACC is still one of the first to do it. The Pac-12 is already announced, but who knows how that's going to go. Beginning in 23, they were going to go to one division, but we don't even know what teams are going to be in the Pac-12 now.
And Dennis, too, I mean, with the national championship, all the bowl setups and those contracts, I mean, how far away are we from a scenario that would have the Big Ten and the SEC competing for their own national championship?
Yeah, I think that's one of the fallouts from this thing last night or yesterday. You don't have to squint too hard and see those 32 teams at the top, SEC and Big Ten, having enough teams to stage their own legitimate national championship playoff. If Cincinnati goes undefeated, who cares? If Boise State goes undefeated, who cares? I mean, the brands they have now assembled are the biggest at the top ever in the history of college athletics. Now, there is the question of, as you mentioned, Clemson, Miami, and Florida State. They are bound by a grant of rights to the ACC, but I was told by one source, and I've already written this, that you'd have to be kind of dumb to figure out those three schools haven't tried to call the SEC already, and maybe even the Big Ten, to try to get hooked onto that big payday. The problem is it's going to take a massive payout to break that grant of rights. But here's the thing, Jeremy. If you're making $100 million in a new league, the SEC or Big Ten, and the payout, the exit fees are $80 to $100 million, you can finance that over 30 years and easily pay that off. You don't even have to go to court for that. So I think all three of those schools are on the table, and I think that bears watching for them to join soon.
Okay, on top of it being Canada Day and Bobby Bonilla Day, it's also the first anniversary of the NIL rules coming into existence in college football. What a year it has been from that standpoint. Dennis, where does the game stand a year into this? And I mean, where is it headed?
Yeah, good day to be talking about all this with the 1-year anniversary of NIL. And we did a series this week, just a 3-part series, just kind of summing that up. College Football 2.0, where is it headed? And it's more muddled than ever now. I think obviously you're going to see a breakaway of some sort. We've already seen it, a tacit breakaway with the Big Ten and SEC. But I think for sure you're going to see a breakaway of the 130 if they stay together from the NCAA, and it's going to be run by a third party, whether that's the college football playoff or another entity. They will form an LLC and take on things like, I think, officiating, rules, healthcare for players. That's going to be a big one. And the biggest one is going to be revenue sharing. I've come to the conclusion with all this money, and we just look what happened yesterday. That's going to put more pressure than ever on the system to share this money from the players. There's going to have to be some revenue sharing. You don't have to call them employees. You don't have to call the schools employers. You just give them a stipend. And I came to the point that even if you gave every FBS scholarship player $30,000 in a stipend, that's 30% of a $1 billion expanded playoff, payout that they're going to have in 2026 projected. That's 30% of the money. Doesn't sound like a lot when in the NFL the players are getting 48%. And at that point, it just becomes a negotiation. They stand apart from each other and say, okay, we'll give you this money. You promise not to sue over getting more of it or us capping it in exchange for, say, give us 2 years in the transfer portal without transferring, and we'll give you this money. I think that's something that would be realistic. But it's all going to change. The events of yesterday changed it, and college football will never be the same.
Yeah, it's going to keep changing. College football writer Dennis Dodd. A latest article, by the way, up on CBSSports.com about the shifting landscape and what could come next. Dennis working the phones like a madman the last couple of days, and it will continue, as he said. And for more from the ever-changing college football landscape, be sure to check out the Cover 3 podcast. The latest episode, Emergency Pod Thursday, reaction to another seismic bit of off-season news. UCLA and USC's plans to move to the Big Ten. Download and follow the Cover 3 podcast wherever you get your podcast on.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.